Welcome to the Contact Center Gurus, the podcast for contact center and customer experience leaders. Learn best practices, new technology, tips and tricks, and more. Listen in.
All right. Welcome back to the Contact Center Gurus podcast. I'm your co-host, Jessica Voss.
And I'm Rob Enslow. Welcome.
Yes, and we have another amazing guest today, Jason Cutter. You've probably seen him everywhere on LinkedIn. I know I have. But Jason, give an intro about yourself.
Well, I am, I am a consultant, trainer, coach. I do some speaking. I've written a few books. I host a few podcasts. And I think, the interesting part is to get here. I took the path that I would say nobody else has taken, which is I got a bachelor's degree in marine biology and I tagged sharks for years. And I really like the punchline for that even is that I chose sharks and dealing with great white sharks instead of people. That's a reflection of my childhood and how I felt about people growing up.
But they were sharks.
Here I am. Yes, the sharks were a much safer, happier customer to deal with than people, let's say.
We're not talking about Shark Tank sharks, folks.
No, sharks. The real ones, Jaws style with big teeth. So how was that? How was being a marine biologist?
It was really fun. And what I realized, it wasn't truly what I wanted to do. Plus, you had to have at least a master's degree to do anything because it was so competitive. I mean, everyone wants to work at, back then, SeaWorld or train dolphins or, be Jacques Cousteau. And literally, I couldn't even get a job for $8 an hour scrubbing boats for Fish and Game without a master's degree. And I realized that wasn't the path I wanted to go down. So it's led to here.
I had no idea. So what did you do after that? Because it seems like a night and day kind of career path.
Well, while I was doing marine biology stuff, I was working in a restaurant and I realized, wait, I am actually pretty good with people. I didn't want to work in the front of the house waiting tables, but I realized I am pretty good at, helping people, dealing with people. From there, I thought I wanted to be in computers. So I went and I worked at Microsoft for a couple of years doing tech support while that was still a thing. I realized that I did not want to be in tech support, which it's not a fun job because it's, one complaint after another. And then I also realized I am not very excited or passionate about technology and computers like I thought I was. And then that was when all of outsourcing began. So we all actually lost our jobs to China and India for the first time ever. This is like 2002. And then I realized I don't know what I want to do. And somebody suggested I go get a job at a mortgage company. And that kind of kicked off, I'm going to air quote sales, but in the beginning, in 2002, the real estate market was so hot, it was pure order taking. There was no actual sales going on. And it wasn't until years later I learned what persuasion actually means.
Wow, that's fascinating.
Just got a day job, at Microsoft, like it's no big deal. Just go work for Arby's or something, They're Microsoft.
Well, I mean, don't tell anyone, but really we were all hired as seasonal contractors to help with overflow for tech support. And I'll tell you, Rob, here's the funny thing. When I got the call,
the story behind
I got hired, and considering how bad I did at parts of the interview, all the technical parts, I nailed all the problem solvings and the customer service part. I failed all the technical parts. But when I got that call, I felt so special. I'm like, I made it. I am working for a company that works for a company that works for Microsoft.
Big.
Like I made it. Then I showed up and I quickly realized they literally hired everybody with a pulse. So, I did make it for a while, but there wasn't a stringent selection process.
No test required.
Not very hard one.
Fill out your name on the job app and you're hired. No.
Mostly, yeah.
Oh my gosh. Well, I mean, sales, is in everything, even if you don't think it is. Even the shark tagging. I mean, you kind of have to be good at persuading the shark to come near you and put the tag on it.
Yeah,
sure that was
funny
pretty
enough, that
scary.
was my job. I was, as the young guy on the crew and the least technical savvy, my job was to keep the 7,000-pound great white shark from eating the bait that was hanging off the boat. So either with a long stick to point them the other way or to pull the bait in. I actually needed the shark to be close so they could get it tagged without messing up the bait side. So yeah, some persuasion. I mean, luckily I still have all my fingers and toes, so I'm happy it was
Cool.
success.
Yeah,
For
I'm
sure.
so scared. I
I'll
can't even
pass.
go to the ocean waist up.
And you know
Okay,
what? Here's
that's
the
enough.
interesting thing. Neither can I. I am no fun at the beach, especially in California, where you can't see in the water very well, because I
Right.
literally know what's there. I am actually no fun to go in the water.
Wow. Now I
I-
probably won't put my feet in talking
No,
to
don't
you.
do it. Don't do
I
it.
would think some salespeople would rather do that though than pick up a phone and call somebody.
Oh, yeah. Good change up there, Rob.
It's very true, right?
Being
Like, I mean,
honest.
when you have that call reluctance and that fear of rejection and just the fear of the unknown that comes with sales, and we could dive into more around that. But yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of things people would rather do. They're like, I would much rather choose sharks than cold calling anybody or having to talk about price with another person who's going to tell me, it's too much.
Wow. Well, yeah. So our theme today, I just love this. Why contact center tech won't save you from meeting salespeople on the phones. Salespeople on the phones is an age-old thing. So, I mean, probably even before phones came out. It was about knocking on doors, right? Scared to knock
Yep.
on doors. So in the contact center, there's usually two realms. There's a service side, service, success, support side, and then you have a sales side. So I see a lot of questions on sales. So why do you think most people end up in sales roles or careers just in general?
I think there's two paths, and I will acknowledge the people who early on in their life, they realize they love selling, right? I've met some of those people. I've talked to enough people where, like I have a buddy, I've become friends with Colin Mitchell. And if you're on LinkedIn, you've probably seen him as well. He knew at an early age, A, that he really liked selling and persuading people, and B, that it was the best career path to make as much money as he wanted to and take care of himself and his family and change his generational wealth. So for him, he realized it. And there are the people who realize that as an early age. And then there's, I'm going to say, the rest, and people more like me, where they think they want to go this way. They want to go this path. They need a job. They don't know what else to do. They fall into a sales job. They apply, they get a sales role. It could be earlier in life. It could be later in life. And they realize, okay, fine, I need to make some money. I heard that you can make a lot of money in sales. Let me give this a shot and we'll see what happens.
Well, I mean, you're talking to salespeople too. I kind of figure for myself, I'll be a salesperson for life. No matter what I'm doing, whether I'm parenting, consulting in business, podcast, selling different software solutions. And I figured out early on that it's kind of my personality, just to be social and talk to people. And I kind of don't look at it as sales. It's more like information, or I consider myself like a hype woman. Hype this up, check this out. This is amazing. Look at this. So maybe like a circus salesperson. It's kind of how I see myself back in the day in my first life.
There you go.
But Rob, you have a similar background for a sales for life.
Yeah, there's nothing, at least as a salesperson for me, that's more, I guess, satisfactory, and it gives me more satisfaction than really actually going in and helping someone solve a problem that they really do have a sincere problem about, and serious problem that maybe they can't find a solution to, very, very easily. And frankly, it's become kind of a passion of mine, to be able to, find those people that, that I can help, that might not be able to be helped by anyone and everyone out there on the streets. And so So yeah, I guess Jason, what was it about your path in life that kind of led to your ability to be able to even sell so effectively?
Yeah.
A marine biologist.
You did so much.
It took me a long time to figure it out. And I mostly just did it by instinct and kind of autopilot. And then I trained others. It was really in the process when I started looking back, especially when I started writing my book, the first book, Selling with Authentic Persuasion, that I really looked at like, okay, what did I do? And what was kind of my key to being successful in sales for me? And a lot of it had to do with the theme that I kind of ran away from and beat myself up about, like my windy path. But I just generally am curious and have a problem solving, puzzle solving mindset. That's what my brain does. It likes to solve puzzles. It likes to solve problems. It likes to take things apart. I am not good at putting it back together again. So if I take apart your remote or something in your car, like I'm not putting it back. Like, good luck with that. Like, that's not my skill that I have, but I can take it apart because I want to know how it works. And I want to know, how do I make it better? And that's, the science side of me. And what I did was I learned, wait, okay, when I'm talking to someone, kind of like what you said, Rob, I want to help them. I see their situation as a problem. They have a goal they want to achieve. They have a pain they want to get out of or avoid. There's got to be a solution. There's always a solution. My brain thinks forever optimist. There's always a way. Like, impossible is nothing. Like, you can do it. And so it's just a matter of figuring out how. And what I realized is applying that to people, which was a bit of a transition, and realizing, wait, I can do that and help people and essentially leave them better off than I found them, which is what you're talking about, Rob.
100%.
Yeah, I think there's something to the problem solving passion that really creates a salesperson. So I think about myself. I am a total addict to escape the rooms. I think I have been to 50 in different states. And for me, one, it's fun. Two, I just love solving puzzles, riddles, problems, and then completing it and finding the solution or winning the game. So I think that kind of translates to my sales life and career, to where finding the problems with the client and then finding a solution, even if it's a solution I'm not selling. I've always done this, no matter what company I've worked for and with, is I have this one solution, but then I go into a client and they have a few problems. Okay, maybe my solution can solve this one problem, but I would love to recommend other solutions, processes, people to help you with this other problem. It almost like fills not a void, but it just makes me feel good. And so I think there's definitely, maybe a trait out there that maybe separates, order takers from salespeople. So why do you think most people end up being an order taker in their sales role versus the latter?
Well, I think there's, based on my experience, a few things that lead to that. One is, before anybody has stepped into an official professional sales role, even if you get your first sales job at 18, 19 years old, you have either bought something at the hands of a classic old school pushy manipulative salesperson.
Car salesman.
Well, you could say the used car salesman model,
Yeah.
which people think in mind, even if you didn't buy a used car, everyone that instantly flashes. And I always put this caveat on there. That's not fair to everyone who sells cars or used cars, right?
Exactly.
But it is universal. It's amazing how universal that image and that feeling, and how the best word I've been using for the last 12 months is gross. Everyone has had an experience, even before that first sales job. Doesn't matter how old you are, that first professional sales job, you as a customer experienced a time where it was gross. You bought it. Maybe you were excited. The magic wore off the next day, minutes later, a week later, and you're like, damn it, I messed up.
I was reading where the sleazy car salesman, like cliche, actually came about in the 60s. So something happened in the 60s where every car salesman was, I guess, sleazy. Maybe they were trained.
Yeah, well, And I think it's a totally different discussion, and we might get to it in the route of this, where, you know, what leads to that being successful versus what people really want. So I think either you have a direct experience or someone close to you, or you see someone. For me, I grew up as a kid when my parents started making more money, they would go to car dealerships every few years and buy a new car. And I would literally spend anywhere from 3 to, the record was 9 hours in a lobby as an only child, watching the 3 channels that were on in a room that smelled like stale coffee and tires, while they battled every single person that could be sent to them. So that makes them, again, that's why I chose sharks as the better, safest option than sales. So I think what happens is everyone has that experience or watches somebody close to them have that experience, and they put the impression on sales that sales is gross, sales is dirty, and sales is all about pushing or tricking somebody else to buy at their expense so that the salesperson can win. Then somebody falls into sales, right? And of course, this isn't for everybody, but most of the time, then they get into sales. And that's the impression. And no one generally wants to be a hypocrite. And so they don't want to treat others like they don't like to be treated. So they see pushing for the sale, asking for the sale, like pushing too hard, right, as salesy. And they don't want to do that because they know what it's like to do that, to have that done to them, and they don't want to do it. So that's usually one side. There's some impression that's left on them where they say, asking for the sale is bad. Then there's the part where the fear of rejection, which is deep evolutionary psychology and biology from millions of years of our success as a species, which we can get into or not, but I talk about that a lot these days. Like, that's on us. And then the third part is organizations. I'm just going to say it. Anyone who's listening to this, most organizations suck at training. They absolutely just drop the ball. They hire people. They say, here's maybe a script, here's maybe a process, and good luck. Here you go. Hopefully you're successful. If not, I'll just hire another 10 people and hope 1 or 2 make it, and I'll just fire the rest of you, right? And they're just doing that, which is bad for people, bad for customers. And that's what happens. So you have these order takers who aren't prepared. They don't have good training. They don't understand literally what you and Rob and I are talking about, which is sales is service. When you do it right, you, as a professional, you are helping somebody, whether you get them to buy or not, but your goal is to help them. And it's not something you're doing to them. It's something you're doing for them and with them. But most organizations aren't even giving that kind of information and training.
It's so true. I mean, even in my early days and in some of the early companies I worked for, I didn't really have all that much training, you know, and we had to kind of figure it out, you know, and you know, today I would do things completely differently than I would 10 years ago. What would you say? So let's just say, for example, what would you say to you or somebody like you coming out, getting into sales? They're just barely fresh in sales and they feel like they're failing. They feel like they're a natural born. They don't feel like they're a natural born salesperson. So they feel like really uncomfortable about it. And they're not sure. What would you say to them? And what mindset, what would you ask them to do? You know, or what would you tell yourself if you go back and tell yourself, you know, kind of encourage yourself at that beginning stage?
Yeah, I love that question. I think that's a great question. And you know, I mentioned my book, but I have a couple of chapters around that in Selling with Authentic Persuasion, especially because that addresses the authentic part, right? A lot of people come to me and they want the tactics. What can I say to overcome objections? How can I close more deals? Like, how do I ask for the sale? Like, what's the best question to, like, you know, corner somebody so that they have to buy? And there's ways you could do that, but the authentic piece is what matters most. Like, what you're addressing is, like, how does that person focus on who they are, and could they or should they be in sales? The fundamentals that I have realized in looking at hundreds and hundreds of salespeople come and go is that I don't believe there is a natural born salesperson, right? I don't think that's a thing. I think there's some personality traits, kind of like you would, Jess, where you're saying you're outgoing, you're like the ringleader, you're the person that's talking and moving around and energy and just like getting people excited. I think that's good. There's, you know, people who have, you know, the charisma for it. They're great storytellers. They're more extroverted. They're more people. I think some of those can work. And if somebody leverages, they can be effective. I would also argue that when somebody is purely in those classic sales kind of characteristics and personalities, it's actually a turnoff for most people, because that sets off alarm bells and they feel freaked out. Like if I sold as excited as probably Jess sells, people would think I'm up to something, right? So it's actually can be a downside if I am super high energy and super excited.
And depending on who you're talking to.
What's the catch?
Yeah.
Exactly.
So hold on. So what you're saying is that everything can be learned.
I am. So 100%. I think
all
there's
I gotta
two
do
things.
is go to a Tony Robbins event. You could be just like me.
No, just go to my events. Even better.
Jason's events.
but yes, Rob. So I think there's a couple things. One is, a lot of times what happens is that we experience people who are just so smooth and successful at sales, at persuasion, at storytelling, at conversations. And what we don't realize, it's kind of like the fallacy of the overnight success. What we don't realize is, even if you met that person at 25 years old, they've probably been working on those skills since they were like 5 years old in a group of people, like friends or family, right? Like that performer where you watch the video, like a Britney Spears, where she's like 4 years old, entertaining and dancing and singing in front of her family. It's not that she was an overnight success. She's literally been doing it forever. Right. And so I think there's part of that. Then there's late bloomers like me that literally had no clue until I was 27, and I'm still figuring it out. But I think everything can be learned. And I think what's more important than extrovert, introvert, charismatic storytelling is certain behaviors that can absolutely be learned if somebody wants to. And when you apply those plus who you authentically are, because I'm authentically a analytical, more introverted than extroverted person. When I take that plus those 5 traits, then anybody can be successful in sales.
That's so interesting because, and I think, and I haven't thought about it extensively, but I think I would agree with you for the most part, because I mean, if you get somebody, it doesn't really matter, what personality they have. If they, one trick I like, and one strategy I like, is when you're following up with somebody, you never say, hey, I'm following up about, blah. You say, hey, does it make sense, to have another meeting about this? Does it make sense to get you a contract? Does it make sense to do a demo? So when you're asking that, it's not a yes or no question. And so it doesn't matter what personality you have. If you can gain that ability to have a natural, less intrusive conversation with somebody, just by the use of words, it makes all the difference. So I can totally see that.
And that's where I think the strategies, the tactics, the language being used, all that stuff is super important. And anybody can be successful with using that if they just embrace who they authentically are and then work on the 5 traits. So for me, like the short list here is openness, curiosity, creativity, persistence, and authenticity. And openness is the number one thing. If you have someone who has a closed mind and they get into sales, they won't learn anything. They think they already know everything, whether they're new or they're a veteran in sales. It's never going to work, right? I've met so many open people who are so curious that they want to absorb everything. And then when they get into a conversation, they are creative, and then they're persistent because they don't want to let that person go without helping them get to a better place. That will trump any natural born personalities that people think they must have.
Yeah,
I totally agree. I'm all about authenticity. I even teach my daughter that, just general in life, you want to be authentic, be who you are. And people can tell when you're being fake or not. I always tell my friends, I can tell when you're fake laughing. I could tell. You're not really laughing. I get it. Just be real. So I try to tell my daughter that all the time. But in sales, so what does it take to be, the most effective, do you think?
I think it's really, and it's kind of a culmination of what we talked about so far. It's realizing that your job in sales is to help somebody else in some way, right? Like you said, even it may be with what you're selling, it may be not what you're selling. It's trusting in some level, and it's a delicate balance, but with abundance, which is, there's 7 billion people on the planet. And how many do you really need to sell? Even if you sell B2B, like how many companies are there that you really need to sell? And how hard do you push someone a square peg into a round hole? How much can you just help them in some way, give them advice, point them in the right direction? So I think that's one of the biggest mindset shifts. Again, sales people who struggle, the order takers, they feel that pushing someone forward is a negative and could lead to rejection, and they just don't like it themselves. So I think one of the biggest things is the more salespeople can shift their thinking about themselves and what they do and look at it like a professional would, because here's the challenge, right? So we've got other professions out there in the world. We got doctors, we got lawyers. They go to school for a long time. They take very hard tests. And then there's a board that governs them. There's oaths they have to abide by. If they mess up, there's malpractice consequences that occur when they go against what they're supposed to be doing in their professional duties for others. Then there's sales. Sales is unregulated, unmonitored, no kind of ethics board, no oath that anyone takes.
License.
You literally show up. My first day in sales, and I use air quotes again because I wasn't selling, it was pure order taking. But my first day at 27 in sales in the mortgage business, my boss said, "Hey, we sent out 10,000 postcards last week. When the phone rings, fill out this lead sheet, put them on hold, and come get me. Welcome to your first day." And at that time, in that state, you didn't even have to be licensed to do mortgages. So I was an unlicensed, untrained, unprofessional, helping people get in the largest amount of debt in their life.
Oh
That's
my gosh.
scary, right? Like
Very
that is true.
scary.
Luckily, I had people
No,
around me
sharks
who
are real
guided
scary.
me, and they mentored me, and they watched my back, and they went through everything so that we did the best for people. But that's the challenge with sales, is people show up. But you have to take it upon yourself, if you're in sales, is to treat it like a professional. What would a professional do as a duty for each person you're talking to? And how do you show up every day like a professional would?
Yeah. Well, why do sales slumps happen? And, I guess, so one of my favorite books is by Jeb Blunt, Fanatical Prospecting. And in it, he talks about the 30-day rule, where you'll feel in 90 days from now, you'll feel, if you're not prospecting, you'll feel it 90 days from now. And so to me, and with a company that I consulted with over the past 5 years, there was one company that, they came to me and they said, "I think we have a closing problem." And I said, "No, you have a prospecting problem. It's prospecting." But from your perspective, why do sales slumps happen?
Well, and I think those are two different things. So it's important for anybody watching or listening this to identify which one do they have. Do they have a prospecting problem, right? Are they starving in the winter because they didn't plant enough seeds in the spring?
Yeah.
Right? Like is everyone basically looking at each other to figure out who they're going to eat because somebody dropped the ball when it came to spring, right? Like, let's just call it like it is. Like,
we should eat Rob first.
I second that vote. Yes, definitely not going to vote for myself. Yes, sorry, Rob. So that's one side, right? That's what Jeb Blunt's talking about. That's what you're referring to is, do I have a slump as an individual contributor who I'm as authentic as I can, like an individual contributor who's just lazy or afraid or isn't doing the work, right? Like I'm making my 8 calls a day and I'm sending my 4 emails and I'm sending 10 LinkedIn messages a day. And I don't know why I can't hit 6 figures or ever hit my quota this quarter. Like it's not rocket science, right? You can't control results. We can't plant seeds in the spring and know exactly how much of a bounty we're going to get. Now, if we don't plant enough, we're not going to get enough. If we plant enough, things may happen. All you can do is control activity. So if you're not putting in activities as an individual or as a company, then that's one thing, right? Like that's just going to be a lack of opportunities that you can even address. The slumps, the other important slumps at the individual level is I have enough opportunities. I'm having these phone calls, but I just can't seem to close anything. And I'm in that slump, like a batter in baseball getting lots of pitches, but they just can't seem to hit anything and they're off their game. In my experience, and I actually, with my clients, I will calculate it down to when the slump will actually happen for individuals, is it's when that person, when they start in the beginning, they are wide-eyed, they got 2 ears, they got 1 mouth, the mouth is closed, the ears are open, the eyes are open, they're a blank canvas and they're learning everything, right? Like, Rob, welcome to your first day. Here's the script, here's the process, you're excited, you're a sponge, you're doing everything. I say this, you say it, do this, you do it. And then at some point you have some success and then you figure out, wait a second, I know what I'm doing. Like, I don't need to listen to Jason anymore. Like, I got this. I don't need the script anymore. I don't need any of this because I'm amazing. And I've heard all the objections and I just don't care what people say because I'm just going to steamroll over them. And they stop doing what worked in the beginning, which was following a process. And essentially they think they're smarter than everyone else. And that's not what customers want. Customers want something completely different, which is what I cover a lot. And that salesperson is literally putting themselves in a slump by thinking they're smarter than everyone else and the process. And the solution to that is always go back to the basics. Usually what I do when a slump happens, I look for the script that they have or the outline. It's usually underneath their drawer under snacks and all kinds of garbage. And I pull it out and it's got all their doodles on it when they were using it. And I say, just follow this process like you did when you were new and like you did when you were crushing it every day. And then they do, and then magically it works.
Yeah, so I think the only other comment I have on that is I think that, I'm a huge fan of the Brutal Truth podcast. And, they talk, I mean, what do you think about what kinds of seeds you're planting and how you're planting them? I get, that it really gets into the dynamics of like, who you're talking to and how you're talking to them, I think it has a tremendous effect as well.
Yeah, I think it's huge, right? Relative to, how much effort are you putting in? Who are you contacting? And then how are you doing it? And like you said, it's perfect. Like, what seeds are you planting? Yeah. And then what is your expectation? Because I see a lot of people who are, planting one thing over here or doing a process and then expecting all these riches to come out the other end. It's like, but you're not operating that way. You're not, that's not what you're nurturing. Or you're just not nurturing anything. You just assume that, if you talk to someone, they're going to buy and you don't understand why they're not. And you don't follow up enough. You don't nurture the relationship. You don't even know why you're following up.
Yep. So I'm going to play devil's advocate here.
Uh-oh.
Oh. So
all right, we're going to eat Jessica next. I'm sorry. No. Rob, you win. Jessica, you.
So I'm also a big fan of adapting. So I got into adapting to different sales methodologies, learning different things and processes over the course of 20 years. And I was thinking probably 8 years ago that social selling was going to be big. Oh, yeah. This was 8 years ago. I was like on LinkedIn when people were using it as their resume, to find jobs. And I'm like, oh man, there's so many people on here. I know what they do. I know their history. I can just message them, connect with them, start building a relationship with them and build up my database. And I was thinking that like 8 years ago. And fast forward, I feel like sales, social selling is everywhere now and new sales methodologies are coming up. But how does that correlate with buyers? Like, how have buyers changed over time? Because I feel like sales and buyers almost are, or salespeople are trying to figure out where the buyers are at to have that conversation.
Yeah, well, and to address the adapting side, I mean, one of the things I realized not even that long ago is that in my career in companies where I was either selling or in charge of sales, I have received 0 minutes of actual sales training. So Rob, you mentioned you've received some training. I've actually received 0 minutes. My first job was order taking in the mortgage business. Then I was self-employed. And then I didn't want to do sales. I didn't think I was in sales. So I was hired as director of ops. And then director of sales was fired. So I got sales and ops role, and then I was in charge, and everyone just assumed I would just fix it all.
Yeah.
So I have
received
always
some
done that
really
with
good
adapted
training.
and read it.
But-
I am completely self-taught. Like I've just read all of these things and just kind of put it together, which I think is a good way to go. It goes to that openness and the curiosity of figuring out what works for you, taking little bits like those strategies.
And results are really the key. I mean, if you can't argue against results.
No,
I know
it's always about results, right? Yeah. That's the only thing. It's like I've heard before, often harsh, but always fair. Like it's just about results. Like people don't like results, but it is what it is. As far as where the consumer is and consumers changing, and again, the buyer could be an individual consumer, or it could be a buyer at a company who's now got to make a decision. Fundamentally, the thing to always remember, B2B, B2C, it doesn't matter, because it's still a person. Right. My friend, I mentioned him earlier, Colin Mitchell, he likes H to H, right? Human to human. It's a human.
I like that.
You're dealing with a human, right? And people are like, oh, do you know anything about B2B sales? Is it a human or is it a robot? Who am I selling to? Because if it's a human, yes.
Oh my gosh,
I got it.
that's like the future.
Yeah, maybe. And then we'll just replace salespeople with robots, and the robots sell each other and persuade each other and lowball price and fight over contracts, and they can, do all that stuff. One's going to have a plaid jacket and a tie and a short sleeve shirt.
Mine's going to have a bow tie.
There we go. So I think the big thing, and this is what I'm trying to educate as many people as possible, is to understand that the buyer, humans, have changed over time, and exceptionally, it's accelerating like crazy. Here's the difference. And it's funny because you brought up this whole thing about used car sales in the 60s and where that started with this thing. Up until recent history, and all three of us are old enough to remember a time where we didn't have all the world's information within arm's reach of us 24/7, even while sleeping. Like most people, even though they know it's wrong, could wake up in the middle of the night, roll over and look something up if they have a question,
100%.
right?
Oh yeah.
100%, right?
All my kids,
so here's
5-year-old has a cell phone. I didn't have a smartphone until I was like 21 or 22, something like that.
I had a pager in high school.
Same here. I remember being cool with a pager.
I was I love you in the little pager talk.
Exactly, right? And so the thing is that in the past, if you wanted to buy something, you were at the mercy of the salesperson in the company because they held all the information and knowledge. If I wanted to buy a car 10 years ago, 20 years ago, whenever and beyond, I had to go to the dealership, and then they had to tell me what the price was. And if I didn't agree with that and I thought I could get a better deal, I had to drive down the street or to another city or another state if I wanted to buy that same car. I had no comparison. I had no data. Literally, the salesperson held all the cards. They held the information, and that was their power. Now, fast forward to now, where if I wasn't on this podcast recording it, my phone would be in arm's reach of me, and I would show like the consumers have information and knowledge and data. So the old school way of selling is I've got all the knowledge and information. I'm going to read the facts, the figures, the features, the benefits. I'm going to read from my slide deck. I'm going to read from the brochure, and I'm going to convince you with all of this info. Consumers don't want info. They have the info. Sometimes they need it. Sometimes you have to use that to help them understand where it's going to benefit them, but they don't need information and knowledge anymore. And too many people in sales are still just vomiting info and thinking that's going to close deals.
Oh yeah. 100%.
It drives me crazy when I hear salespeople talk about the cloud. I'm like, dude, that was like 6-7 years ago. Let's move on.
I know. So Jason, what can business owners do to, I guess, support their sales teams and, really to be more effective? What's the number one thing you would say to them?
I mean, I think the biggest thing is it's understanding that consumers change. It's understanding that your salespeople are all different. And it's really about helping the people on the team be successful at the game of sales. So, in organizations can be different. It might be systems, processes. I mean, obviously there's the title of our conversation is why technology is not going to fix basically your sales problem. Technology is there and it should support the salespeople, and you should have all those tools in place. But generally what I see is that companies are not giving enough training, enough guidance, enough coaching, using tools to help make things scalable, right? Like giving feedback, listening to phone calls, a lot of that stuff can be done with some cool technology these days. But at the end of the day, realizing that we still need humans on the phone for a reason, because they've got to convince other scared, confused, worried humans to make the best choice for them. And so as long as that's the case, you've got to do whatever you can to help your people with their mindset, understanding their role, and then helping them with actually selling in the current state, not in the 60s and that classic model, for now and in the future as buyers evolve and are smarter than you and smarter than your salespeople with information.
Oh yeah, but I'm a buyer and a salesperson, and I like to do my own research and get as knowledgeable as I can before I actually talk to a salesperson. So at one, I can ask the relevant questions that I actually want to ask rather than just being presented to. But that's just me. What I'm interested in though is you do consulting. Can you talk about what you do for clients and maybe some of our listeners out there?
Yeah. So one of the common places that I start, a lot of companies know we're here with our team, our size, maybe they have turnover issues, or they're achieving revenue, but they're not where they want to be. They have this goal of where they want to be or where they think they should be. So a lot of companies, we start with what I call a gap analysis, where think of a medical exam where we look under the hood and figure out where are you at, what could be put in place, and then where to go. A lot of companies, they don't know, or they have an idea, or they're even just want to try things out and see, okay, is this going to make sense? So that's always a good place to go. Beyond that, one of the things I love doing the most is training. It's workshops. It's helping the salespeople in seeing their role differently. A lot of stuff that we talk about here, but even going at a deeper level and understanding their psychology, the psychology of buyers, what buyers are really afraid of, and what gets in the buyer's way. Again, any buyer, any industry, consumer, doesn't matter. They're all humans. So I focus on that. But what I'm most excited about these days are programs I have focusing on leaders. So one of the common traits in sales teams is, hey, Joe, you're pretty good at sales. I'm going to make you a manager now. Good luck. And no training, no guidance.
So many times.
It happens everywhere.
Oh my gosh.
And it happens.
They may not have the leadership skills and personality. Okay, you know how to sell the solution or service, but boy, I've seen some bad decisions.
And there's so many problems with that. And it's interesting because as I talk to people and I see organizations, it's not just sales. It happens in service. It happens in support. I've worked for engineering companies where they do that. Hey, you're the best engineer who seems to be okay with people. You're now in charge of the engineers, right? And so the challenge with that, like you said, is that it's a different skill. It's a different mindset. And one of the biggest problems is that somebody was successful in sales doing it their way. Then they become some kind of manager, team lead, supervisor on up, and they just assume everyone else sees the matrix like they do. And then they don't understand how to help people who don't see it that way, right? Like there's analytical me, and then there's you, and then there's Rob. Like somebody's managing the three of us.
We're all different.
3 different people. And so I'm doing a lot of that. Companies are bringing me in so that we can do some training with their managers that they're not providing internally, which is okay. The first step is admitting you have a problem, and then we can take care of it from there. But let's help, because the more we can help the leaders of the company of sales succeed, attrition goes down, closing effectiveness goes up, revenue goes up. Like it stabilizes everything instead of the hamster wheel of sales.
Wow.
You can do it all too. I mean, Elon Musk is a rare example of someone who learned how to do it all, but it's so rare, Yeah. And I think that's the key, right? Is understanding what you can do, what you're good at. Here's what I will tell you. Like I'm really good in sales leadership and all of that system. But I also know where all my weaknesses are, like graphic design, marketing,
logos. Like, don't
Yeah.
ask me to help with any of that.
You're like, I won't do that. So
No.
where can people find more information about you? What's your website? Or do you want me to have them call you?
Yeah, call me. Email works really well too. So anyone listening to this, jason@cutterconsultinggroup.com. If you want to talk about anything that your company might need, as well as I mentioned some other things. I have some ebooks too that are available that I love sending out. One's overcoming objections, and then one's for leaders on how to motivate your team. So I always love sharing those. And then for anyone that wants to find out about what I have going on, go to jasoncutter.com. So that's a hub. I've got the podcasts on there. I've got the books on there, the programs I have, the new mastermind program I have for sales executives and chief revenue officers is on there. So yeah, jasoncutter.com.
Awesome. And make sure to pick up Selling with Authentic Persuasion. Love it. Well, thank you so much, Jason. It's been fun and I appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me.
Jason.
Thanks for listening to the Contact Center Gurus podcast. Don't forget to subscribe, and we will see you next time.